My mistress is pregnant. Take my dad and leave.
Hey, what do you think you're saying without helping with the care?
Ryan, calm down. At first, my husband didn't seem to know who Ryan was. But after seeing my attitude and hearing the name, he finally remembered his own son. He openly frowned and glared at Ryan with displeasure.
What are you doing here? Just showing up now. You must be after the money. I'm not giving a single cent to a cold-hearted son like you. Leave with that woman too.
Ryan seemed too shocked by his words to respond. In contrast, I felt a chilling calm come over me. Fine, but I'm leaving your dad behind, because... I lifted the blanket off my father-in-law and showed his back to my husband. My husband's eyes started trembling and darting around. He seemed to have misunderstood. I need to make him realize that not everything goes his way. I am Emily Smith, 53 years old. I married my husband, Mike, through an arranged introduction in my 20s. Our son, Ryan, is now living independently, and currently, I live with Mike and my father-in-law, George, in their family home. Although we have been married for a long time, my relationship with Mike isn't great. Ever since my parents passed away, Mike and his father have been treating me increasingly poorly. They make degrading remarks about women daily. Mike's mother passed away years ago, so I have no one on my side. Only Ryan supports me. But I don't want him to be stuck in a place like this forever. Even after he moved out, Ryan kept in touch and showed his concern for me, but I always tried to assure him that I was managing fine, to keep him from worrying. Life felt like walking on thin ice, but even that fragile piece shattered when something happened.
Is Ryan not coming by this month either? After all I've done for him, running off like this is what he learned.
At breakfast, my father-in-law banged the table loudly. Startled, I dropped my shoulders and lowered my gaze. Ryan didn't get along with his hot-tempered grandfather or my husband, who always followed his father's lead and had stopped visiting after starting college. He kept in frequent contact with me and showed his concern, but I never told him to come by. I didn't want my dear son tied to a place like this.
Hey, are you listening? It's because you waste time working instead of caring for the housework. Women like you shouldn't have gone to college, wasting time on titles instead of being useful.
Despite being married to Mike for years, my father-in-law has never once addressed me by name. All I ever heard were terms like hey or you, spat at me with disdain. Naturally, he'd never said thank you or apologized either. Mike, influenced by his father, rarely used my name as well. To both of them, it seemed like I was just a housekeeper.
A woman should keep the house, but you're still playing at being a teacher in that calligraphy class. It's disgraceful.
Exactly, Mike. She acts up because you let her get away with it. You should be stricter with her.
My only solace was that Ryan had grown up unaffected by the outdated views of these two. Responding to them only added fuel to the fire, so I stayed silent and kept doing my chores. When Ryan was at home, he would speak up if things got too bad, but every time I won an argument, the two of them became extremely emotional. Sometimes it would even get physical, and now that I've fulfilled my biggest duty of raising Ryan with the right values, there was no reason to exhaust myself arguing. However, since Ryan moved out, they seem to think I've finally become obedient, and the atmosphere at home has only gotten harsher.
So you think staying silent is enough? No wonder even your precious son abandoned you.
My husband and father-in-law didn't even have Ryan's contact info, and since I only kept Ryan's number in my phone, they assumed I couldn't reach him either. It angered me that they thought Ryan was so heartless, but saying something would only make things harder for Ryan. I felt pathetic for not being able to defend my son, but I chose to remain silent.
It's because you spoiled Ryan that he doesn't contact us now. Do you understand how much that's your fault?
Mike glared at me as he shoved his breakfast plate my way. More than half of the food was still left, all of it vegetables. The immaturity was astonishing.
You're still not good at cooking, are you? How many years have you been cooking in the kitchen? You ignore your duties to focus on your hobbies, and this is the result.
I don't need this kind of food either. Get it out of here already. It's inedible.
Both of them hated vegetables, especially raw ones, so whenever I served them, they complained that it was proof of my poor cooking skills. They eat fried food without a word, so it's just picky eating. But it seems they can't rest without complaining to me. But you need to eat vegetables too.
It's not about the vegetables. Your cooking is so bad I can't eat it.
He shouted, and I gave up, throwing the leftovers in the trash. If I only made the meals they didn't complain about, they'd feel sick within 3 days, and eventually follow. And then I'd be blamed for that too, so even if I knew they'd be angry, I had to try and provide a balanced diet. My husband and father-in-law didn't miss the sight of me sighing in exhaustion.
What's with that sigh? If you have complaints, say them out loud.
Who do you think makes it possible for you to live? If you don't like it, get out.
The two laughed, clearly enjoying themselves, knowing I had nowhere to go. It seemed their behavior had visibly worsened since my parents passed away. With no one to turn to for help, they probably felt safe in tormenting me. In front of my parents, neither had shown their true colors. My parents arranged my marriage with Mike out of pure goodwill. They couldn't have imagined the wealthy Smith family would be so full of issues. I swallowed another sigh and quietly resumed my chores. By 10 o'clock, I needed to leave for work. Until then, I had to complete the housework perfectly to avoid any complaints from my husband or father-in-law. What? George was hit by a car in a hit and run. I let out a shocked cry at the call from the police while I was at work. They had called Mike first, but since he was far away, he asked them to contact me as his wife. I had known Mike would be on a business trip for a week, so I immediately left work early and headed to the hospital. My father-in-law was in critical condition, unconscious. Given his age, the chances of him waking up were low. The staff told me to talk to him, but I had no memories of anything other than being insulted by him. Even if I did speak to him, it was only for practical matters, never for casual conversation. The one who truly knew him and spoke with him often was Mike. Once Mike got back from his trip, I'd explain the situation and have him visit. Surely my father-in-law would be happier hearing from him than from me. With that in mind, I decided to do whatever I could for now. No matter how much I disliked him, I didn't want to abandon him. George, Mike will be here soon. Please hang in there. Wake up. I spoke nervously and rubbed his arm. It was the first time I'd seen him this quiet. He was always angry in front of me, so it felt strange. Taking care of him in the hospital while working was tough, but I just had to hold on until Mike returned from his trip. I endured the week with that thought. However, when Mike came back, his response was cold.
I'm busy with work. You take care of Dad.
My husband's family is wealthy and owns a company. He is currently the CEO, so I understand he's busy, but his attitude toward his father, the former CEO, seemed too disrespectful. But at least visit him in the hospital.
This current deal is Dad's pet project. Making it a success is my way of showing my gratitude. Dad would definitely be happier that way. I'm so busy I won't be able to come home either.
He shouted without giving me a chance to respond, then left for work. As he said, he hardly came home anymore, and the burden of caregiving fell entirely on me.
Emily, you don't look well. Are you all right?
Thanks, I'm fine. I love my job, so if possible, I don't want to quit. Being at work is far more relaxing than being in that suffocating house. But taking care of my father-in-law relentlessly weighed on my life. It was about a 20-minute drive from home to the hospital, but the constant trips were exhausting. On top of that, my husband had started becoming stingy with money.
Why are the hospital bills this high? He's just bedridden, right? Go talk to the hospital again. If I don't get a satisfactory answer, I'm not paying this kind of money.
He's in a coma and can't eat, so the IVs cost money. I've explained this over and over.
Are you saying I don't understand anything? Don't insult me. You're just bad at explaining. If you want to pay that much, then you pay it. Why do you think you're working?
I was fed up with my husband not only refusing to pay his father's medical expenses and other necessary costs, but also becoming stingy with even our living expenses. For now, I could manage with my savings and salary, but if this continued, my father-in-law and I wouldn't survive. Since my husband wasn't technically refusing income, we couldn't receive any public assistance. I didn't know where to turn for help and felt utterly lost. It was at that moment that Ryan visited the hospital.
Mom, I heard about Grandpa. It must have been tough for you. I'm really sorry for not coming sooner.
Ryan, there's no need to apologize. What about work?
It's fine. Actually, I had some unused paid leaves piling up, so it was perfect timing.
Apparently, he had a contact at the hospital and came back after hearing about our situation.
I feel sorry for Grandpa as a human being, but that's about it. I feel no gratitude, only resentment for how he treated you. I came back because I was worried about you. You kept putting on a brave face whenever I called, so I figured talking in person would be the quickest way.
What a kind son I have. I tried my best to hold back my tears. But Ryan looked troubled. I assumed it was because he saw our current situation, but it seemed there was more to it.
I know this isn't the best time, but I saw Dad near the station today.
What? But he said he was on a business trip.
That was a lie. He was walking arm in arm with some woman.
I was at a loss for words. I felt suffocated and dizzy. If someone asked me if I still loved him, I wouldn't know how to answer, but even so, for him to be out having fun during a time like this, and while his own father is in a coma, no less. I can't believe this. He dumped his own father on me while he goes off with some woman. Since my husband hadn't seen Ryan in a while, he didn't even recognize his own son when they passed each other. Ryan was exasperated but had never expected much from him anyway, so he shrugged it off as convenient. It seems Ryan followed them for a bit and took pictures, showing me the truth with images of my husband entering a hotel with an unknown woman. Since my parents had arranged the marriage in good faith, I had been resistant to the idea of divorce. But now, I felt like maybe it was time to let it go.
Mom, why don't you just get a divorce?
Ryan gently suggested. It wasn't the first time he'd brought it up.
I'm making a decent living, but I'm busy. It'd help a lot if you could help with the housework. Why don't we live together?
Ryan is a kind child. He's always been concerned about how I've been treated at home. I was tempted by his proposal, but I didn't want to hold back my independent son. If I were to get a divorce, I wanted to do it in a way that allowed me to stand on my own 2 feet. Thank you, Ryan. I'll seriously think about it. Ryan looked at me with concern, but he gave me a smile as well.
I'm thinking of bringing Dad home.
Just as I was getting used to balancing work and caregiving with Ryan's help, my husband dropped a bombshell. What? We can't even provide the treatment and rehab the doctors recommend. It was clearly impossible to care for my father-in-law at home under those conditions. My husband didn't like my opposition, and he shouted at me with an obvious scowl.
Dad said he's most comfortable at home. It's obvious he'd be better off at home than stuck in a hospital. How can you not understand that? You're just going through the motions without any heart, and that's why Dad isn't getting better.
The doctor had said from the start that it would be difficult for my father-in-law to recover. If there was a reason, it was because my husband kept opposing the doctor's instructions and refusing to spend money. I almost argued again, but I knew that would only make him angrier. So I swallowed my words. All right, I'll discuss it with the doctor, but you need to come to the hospital too.
You explain it. I'm busy.
You have the final say, so they won't approve it if it's just me. When I pointed out that he was the one with authority at home, he seemed pleased and agreed to go to the hospital, which was unusual. Maybe he realized that if he left it to me, I'd never agree to home care. However, unlike me, whom he could always yell at, the people at the hospital were medical professionals. Naturally, my husband's amateurish knowledge didn't work on them.
If you want home care, it will be challenging until there's more recovery. and you'd need appropriate equipment at home. You'll also need to discuss with a caseworker and find a primary doctor and nurse to come to the house. That will also require a contract, which involves costs. Are you okay with that?
The doctor gave him a stern look. Since he'd been refusing treatments due to costs all along. Faced with the mention of money, my prideful husband nearly exploded, but being a coward at heart, he managed to hold back his anger.
It's fine. My wife will quit her job to focus on caregiving.
What? You never told me that. Not only was I shocked, but even the doctor and nurse present were surprised at his sudden declaration without any consultation. However, my husband had finally reached the peak of his anger, and he began yelling at me right there, without any regard for the people around.
Do you not care if Dad dies? You're heartless.
Even if I gave in here, it was obvious my husband would start withholding money again. If I quit my job, there would be nothing left for me and my father-in-law but a future of poverty. I tried to persuade my husband with the doctor's help, but his resolve seemed unwavering, and the discussion ended without progress. The doctor and I were both at a loss. As everyone involved grew more exhausted, my husband took a shocking action. It happened about a week after he first said he wanted to bring his father home from the hospital. Suddenly, I got a call from him. I had a bad feeling and honestly didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it either. Reluctantly, I pressed the answer button on my phone. Hello. What my husband said next was unbelievable.
I've discharged Dad. Since neither you nor that primary doctor were there, the hospital was happy to let him go.
What? My husband had forcibly discharged my father-in-law from the hospital. Since my husband was his only biological child, his opinion held significant weight. The hospital couldn't keep a patient indefinitely without any hope of recovery. And there were certainly people who found home care more convenient in such cases. Seeing my father-in-law lying in bed, I felt utterly lost.
Quit your job and take care of Dad.
And now, my husband's harassment began. I resisted, of course, but once my husband was fired up, there was no stopping him.
My wife needs to provide care. Make her quit her job now. Are you going to abandon a bedridden elderly person? Are you guys just going to leave an old man to die?
He even came to my workplace, making a scene at the front desk. Many of my students and co-workers knew about my situation, and they were all equally shocked. I finally gave in to my husband's outburst, which showed no signs of stopping. Fine, I'll quit.
You should have just done that from the start. Trying to fight back only makes things worse at work. The smartest choice is to just listen to me quietly, got it?
If I kept resisting, it would only cause more trouble for my workplace. Though some people offered to help me by suggesting I contact the police, I chose to resign. Surely my husband's harassment would come faster than anything the police could do to help. The harassment didn't stop even after I quit my job and focused on caregiving. Even though he was the one who insisted on home care for his father, my husband continued to come home only occasionally. Of course, he never helped with the caregiving, and instead enjoyed criticizing me over anything he could find.
Hey, are you even cleaning? There's dust everywhere. Living in a room like this could make Dad's condition worse, you know?
Sitting back on the couch with a smirk, he showed no concern for his father's well-being. It seemed he had taken his father in just to harass me.
Dad's room stinks. You're bathing him, right?
George can't even get in a wheelchair. I can't put him in the bath, but I wipe him down every day and make sure to reposition him to prevent bed sores.
Put him in the bath. I can't stand the smell. The house feels so dirty because you're slacking off on your chores. Why do you think I made you quit your job to focus on the housework?
It's no surprise if I break down in this situation. Honestly, I was really feeling overwhelmed, and Ryan started helping me out as long as he didn't have to run into Mike. While I felt bad for relying on Ryan, I found myself leaning on him for emotional support. I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm really sorry. I know you have work too.
Mom, you don't need to apologize. Besides, my job can be done remotely just fine. I've always regretted leaving you behind when I moved out. Please, just let me do this for my own peace of mind.
It's hard to believe he's related to my husband by blood. How could he be such a kind child? Ryan's kindness seeped into my worn-out heart. However, as if he couldn't even tolerate that brief moment of peace, my husband went on to say something even more outrageous.
My mistress is pregnant. Take Dad and leave.
Hey, how can you say that without even helping with the caregiving?
Ryan, calm down. At first, it seemed my husband didn't know who Ryan was. But after seeing my reaction and hearing the name, he finally remembered his own son. He frowned obviously and glared at Ryan with displeasure.
What are you doing here? Just showing up now. You're probably just after the inheritance. I won't give a cent to a cold-hearted son like you. Get out along with that woman.
Ryan was too stunned by his father's words to say anything. In contrast, I felt a chilling calm wash over me. Fine, but I'm leaving George here, because... I lifted the blanket covering my father-in-law and showed his back to my husband. There was a corset wrapped around him, but scars were visible over a wide area. It looked like it was still in the process of healing, and it seemed my husband was seeing it for the first time. His eyes began to shake and dart around. George still hasn't regained consciousness, and he shouldn't be moved carelessly. It was risky enough for him to come back here, let alone move again. If he had stayed in the hospital, he might have recovered a bit, but you insisted on bringing him home.
But he could be discharged, couldn't he?
Despite being visibly shaken by the sight of the scars, my husband stubbornly tried to argue back. Even in front of his severely injured father, he was still trying to pin the blame on me. How pathetic. The caseworker also said not to put too much strain on him. Moving right now is out of the question. Do you even care what happens to your own father?
It's because you aren't taking proper care of him. Stop trying to put the blame on me.
My husband reflexively shouted in response to my words. It was Ryan who argued back.
Knock it off. Mom isn't obligated to take care of Grandpa.
Bringing him to this house was the limit, and besides, you're his actual son. Even if I said I'd take him after we divorced, the caseworker, the primary doctor, and everyone else would object. No one would approve it. Go ahead and suggest it. Unlike the time he was discharged, no one will agree now. My rebuttal seemed to genuinely surprise my husband. At first, he looked shocked, but soon his face turned bright red with anger at being challenged.
Who do you think you're talking to? Things will never go the way you want.
Enough already. That's what I should be saying to you.
Ryan shouted, and the intensity of it made my husband fall silent. Whether he was embarrassed by losing to his own son, his body shook with frustration.
You said you'd take care of Grandpa when you discharged him, didn't you? But you haven't even bothered to come home most of the time.
Ryan found this out after asking his contact at the hospital. There are also plenty of other things I could use against my husband if I wanted to.
In addition, you might have forgotten, but you demanded that Mom quit her job at the calligraphy school. You also intimidated the staff and caused a scene at the reception. The police know all about that. I'll give you back your own words. Don't think everything will always go your way.
I packed my things and got ready to leave the house. It had been quite some time since my husband started withholding our living expenses. Since I had been considering divorce ever since his affair was discovered, I was ready to leave immediately.
And for all the unfair things you've done to Mom and the proof of your affair you just mentioned, get ready to pay Mom a hefty amount in alimony.
You! How dare you talk to your own parent like that?
Ha! You didn't even remember my face, and now you say that?
If you want to leave so badly, then leave. I won't pay a cent, even if you sue.
After spitting those words at Ryan, my husband turned to look at me. Seeing me with my bags packed, his expression changed.
Hey, take Dad with you. It's your job to take care of him.
He still didn't understand a word Ryan or I had said. A deep anger welled up from within me. I told you he can't be moved. Were you even listening? If you think I'm lying, go confirm it with the caseworker yourself. Finally, I'd had enough, and I yelled louder than I ever had before. Maybe my husband hadn't expected this because he fell completely silent. Ryan spoke to him one last time.
I know you took time off work for caregiving and then cheated on Mom. I've informed your company, so you can look forward to their response.
That seemed to bring my husband back to his senses. He smirked mockingly and glared at his own son with eyes full of hatred.
I'm the CEO. A response. Don't make me laugh.
There's no hope for him anymore. I didn't even feel like turning back to look at him. After that, I ended up staying at Ryan's place for the time being. I couldn't stay with my son forever, so I had already started looking for a job and a new place.
You don't have to rush. Why not take it easy for a while? You've been through a lot, Mom.
Thank you, but it helps me take my mind off things if I stay busy. Ryan stopped working remotely and started going into the office. Since I was alone during the day, I helped with the housework, but I wasn't working, and there was no caregiving to do. Ryan, of course, never suddenly yelled at me, so it felt like heaven. And perhaps because of that, painful memories would sometimes come to mind out of nowhere. That day too, I remembered being yelled at by my husband, and my mood sank.
Hey, open up. I know you're in there. Get out here now.
Wait, is this for real? As if the painful memories had come to life, my husband's voice echoed through the room. Hoping it was just a dream, I looked at the door camera and saw my husband standing there with his mistress, Megan. While I was deciding whether to answer or ignore them, they began shouting loudly.
Because of you, my life is ruined. Dad has died.
Leaving a dependent elderly person behind is unbelievable. You're heartless.
If this continues, I'll only cause more trouble for Ryan. I'm already imposing on him by staying here. Be quiet. Unable to take it anymore, I rushed out of the room, and the two of them looked at me with smirking, nasty smiles. They must think their prey has finally come out of hiding.
Don't you dare act all high and mighty. You abandoned your own father.
I heard it all from Mike. You were out playing around instead of doing proper housework.
So you divorced me without any gratitude for me supporting you. And now you're tricking our son into taking care of you.
At least it seemed they didn't plan to say anything bad about Ryan. That gave me a small sense of relief, but I couldn't stay quiet in the face of baseless accusations. Stop saying things that aren't true.
That's you. You greedy, cunning woman.
My husband's behavior was exaggerated, almost theatrical. It seemed his goal was to spread bad rumors about me.
You're the one trying to get alimony with false claims. Mike's already suffered enough. What more do you want to take from him?
What in the world has this woman heard from him? Or perhaps she knows everything and is helping him anyway. I was at a loss for words. After all the horrible treatment, I never expected them to be so shamelessly defiant. As I stood there, stunned, the building's security guard approached me.
Is anything going wrong?
It was Megan who answered his question.
Sure, she's wrong. She abandoned her own father. What a horrible woman. Call the police?
Megan screamed, but the guard remained calm.
I've heard about the situation from Ryan.
Had Ryan predicted this would happen? The guard glared at my husband and Megan.
I've already called the police, so you two will need to come with me. Emily, please go back inside. Ryan will be back soon.
As I was being led back to the apartment, the police arrived and put a hand on my husband and Megan's shoulders.
She's fooled all of you.
Yes, we're the real victims here.
No matter how much they yelled, the fact remained that they had caused a scene in front of someone's home, and it seemed Ryan had already informed the authorities, so the two of them were taken away without argument. Ryan returned 30 minutes later.
Mom, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Are you okay?
I'm the one who should apologize for causing trouble. Ryan, who apologized first, had a somewhat relieved expression. When I asked him why, he responded with a mischievous smile.
Dad's company just became a subsidiary of mine.
What? Ryan started his own company with friends while still in college, and now he's the CEO of a publicly listed company. My husband always said that Ryan's success was just a temporary thing, that people were only interested because he was young, but it seems the real short-lived success was his own.
Because he was out messing around, his company was on the verge of collapse. It was easy to buy it out. He's probably just finding out he's been fired now.
Ryan looked genuinely amused as he said that. A few days later, a news article appeared about my husband and Megan being arrested.
Wow, I'm actually surprised.
What do you mean? As I read through the details, the phrase hit and run on a parent jumped out at me. Apparently, since the company was failing and his father told him to step down as CEO, my husband conspired with Megan to run his father over. So that business trip was just to create an alibi. If he were close enough to rush to the hospital, he might have been suspected of the hit and run, so he even bought a train ticket and told both the company and me he was on a trip. The case drew significant attention due to his selfish motives and his collaboration with his mistress, and it was covered on talk shows for some time. Reporters persistently tried to get comments from Ryan and me, but since we were in the middle of divorce proceedings and had essentially cut ties, the focus gradually shifted to Megan's relationships and the large amounts of embezzlement my husband had committed. I can't believe he was embezzling too.
Sounds like the company plans to sue him.
In a way, it was a small blessing amidst the misfortune, as my husband's arrest made the divorce process go smoothly. It looks like I'll get nearly the full amount of alimony I was asking for. However, now that my ex-husband is a criminal facing a lawsuit from his company, I doubt he'll be able to pay the alimony. The Smith family was wealthy, and my ex-husband had inherited his father's estate, so those assets are being seized to settle the payments, and I just have to wait. Apparently, my ex-husband is resisting, but after losing his job and receiving a prison sentence for such a heinous crime, it's no surprise he's seen as unable to pay. It's pointless for him to resist. Though life was hectic for a while, once things settled down, I decided to visit the house. It was the house where I spent years being mistreated by my father-in-law and husband. Honestly, aside from raising Ryan, I have no good memories there, but still, having spent so many years in that house, I was curious about its current state. With Ryan seeing me off, I went alone, only to find that the old house was being demolished and a new one was being built. The surrounding land, which had also belonged to the Smith family, already had a buyer. I felt a mix of sadness and relief. As I stood there, feeling both freed and abandoned, a neighbor called out to me.
"Hey, are you Emily?"
You. I was at a loss for words. For a moment, I even thought I might be scolded for being related to a criminal. But to my surprise, the elderly woman smiled warmly and took my hands in hers.
"It is you, Emily. I'm so glad to see you doing well. We've all been worried about you. That father and son treated you so terribly."
She kept saying how glad she was, and she was someone who had always been kind to me in the neighborhood. Now that I think about it, even though my father-in-law and husband treated me coldly, The neighbors were always kind. When I went to help out with community events, they welcomed me warmly, greeted me with smiles, and chatted with me. Even when I was raising Ryan, the neighbors were all kind to both of us.
I'm sorry I could only watch back then and couldn't help. Are you living with your son now?
Yes, well, thanks to everyone, I've moved to a nearby town.
That's good to hear. I'm relieved. Take good care of your son.
The elderly woman smiled warmly and handed me a chilled bottle of water. A few more neighbors gathered, and we chatted. When they heard I had divorced and was now living with Ryan, they were genuinely happy for me, as if it were their own joy. I received the same warm welcome at my old workplace, where the familiar faces surrounded me. Everyone expressed their concern for me.
I'm so glad to see you doing well. I'm sorry we couldn't help you back then.
If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask.
How kind they all were. When I was being constantly berated by my father-in-law and husband, I hadn't truly noticed the people around me. I hadn't realized there were so many who cared about me. Thank you, everyone. Feeling saved, I stood there, surrounded by my coworkers, and cried for a while. It turns out Megan had a history of other frauds, and she also received a prison sentence. The investigation revealed she had a common-law husband, and the baby she was carrying was his. She had approached my husband purely for his money. She realized my husband hadn't yet inherited any wealth, and that his father intended to leave the estate to Ryan to rebuild the company. So, she manipulated my husband to try to steal the inheritance. My husband was apparently deeply shaken when he found out. But it no longer had anything to do with me, so I just watched it play out as a story on the talk shows. A few years later, I heard through the grapevine that the two had been released, but I don't know what happened to them after that. With their faces so widely publicized, I doubt they'll ever be able to live normal lives again. With my ex-husband in that state, he never returned to the area around his family home, and my father-in-law ended up quietly buried in a shared cemetery nearby without even a proper gravestone. After the divorce, I received a decent amount of alimony and rented an apartment. Ryan had offered to let me live with him until the end, but I didn't want to disrupt his successful life, nor could I keep relying on him forever. In the end, I got my old job back at the calligraphy school and decided to support myself. Now that I no longer had to worry about my father-in-law or husband, I often visited Ryan's house, and Ryan would come to visit me too. I couldn't do that before, but now I could go out with my coworkers, interact with my students, and enjoy every day to the fullest. Ryan is planning to introduce his girlfriend to me soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. My life is just beginning. After all those years of holding back, I plan to live life to the fullest and enjoy every moment.